Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we're gonna combine air dry clay with coffee. That's such a fun idea that Marci from the YouTube channel Mix It Up Marci approached me with. She has a YouTube channel where she shows a lot of cool DIY projects about air dry clay and also a lot of coffee painting techniques. I'm really happy she reached out to me and asked me for this fun collaboration. So today we're gonna do some air dry clay projects using each other's techniques. So in my case that means that I will use coffee to texture and also to paint my air dry clay pieces. So this is the style I had in mind that I wanted my pieces to look like. I really enjoy the combination of the speckled clay and the earthy and creamy color palette, and I think that's perfect to recreate with coffee. So these are all the things you need for this project. I will also write them for you in the description box. This video is not sponsored, so all the items I use here I use because I like working with them. So the first piece I wanted to tackle is this little flower pot that I was kind of hoping to look a little bit like this. I started by unpacking my air dry clay. To achieve the speckled look, I decided to go with grounded coffee powder. I figured that the easiest way to evenly mix it into the clay is to create layers of clay and grounded coffee and then wedge it until you feel that the clay has a good consistency and the coffee powder is distributed evenly. Maybe start with only a bit of coffee and add more if you feel like you want more speckles in the clay. One of the most asked questions I get about air dry clay is if it's waterproof. So unfortunately, no, it's not. But there is some little tricks of how you can use it as a vase or a flower pot anyways, by using a container as a base and then adding air dry clay around it. But you cannot use it for soap trays, cups or food plates or anything where the air dry clay would be exposed to a lot of moisture or water. In my case, I went for a little plastic container that had a good size for a little plant pot. But you can use glass or ceramic pots or even a cut-off plastic bottle. It just needs to be completely sealed so that it protects the air dry clay from any water. I cut out a little paper template to know how big my clay slab needs to be. I rolled out the clay until it was about half a centimeter thick and then used the template to cut out my slab, as well as a circle for the bottom piece. In my case, I cut out the bottom piece a bit too small, so I rolled it a little bit more to make it slightly larger. I used my plastic container to build the clay around. To merge the ends, I scratched the parts that will be touching each other with my X-Acto knife. That so-called scoring helps the clay to stick together better. I also added a bit of water to make the clay a bit stickier, but you have to make sure not to use too much as this could make the clay too slippery. Then I blended the clay along the edge and smoothened it all out. The same scoring technique I used to merge the wall to the bottom piece. The bottom piece should be slightly larger than the body, so you can blend the clay as well. If you have a modeling tool, that could help you to get the seams nice and smooth. But if you don't, you can use a small knife or one of those wooden popsicle sticks, or just your finger normally works just fine. I repeated the same steps around a wooden dowel to get a thin and tall vase. In this case, I used the dowel only to get the right shape and then removed it. So this vase doesn't have any inlet and will only be used for faux or dried plants, as it will not be able to handle any water. To give it a bit more character, I also added a little handle. For that I rolled a coil and added it by first scoring and then blending the clay. Before I can paint on them, they will have to be put aside to dry. With the rest of the speckled clay, I wanted to create a bowl. I used this ceramic dish as a mold and started by cutting a circle around it. This bowl has this flat part in the bottom that I think is perfect to create a flat foot part for my bowl, so I gently pressed the clay down all the way. And lifting the sides a little helped to release the air that gets trapped underneath and made it possible to get the clay nice and even into the bottom of the bowl. When the clay dries, it shrinks, so it should be easy to remove it from the mold once it's all dry. I also made some non-speckled bowls for a different coffee painting technique. If you want to see this process in more detail, you can check out my other video I made about air dry clay trays. I will link that for you. But then I set all my pieces to the side to let them dry. Depending on the thickness of your pieces and the moisture in your surrounding, the drying time can vary a little bit. In my case, I let them dry for 1.5 days. And then I came back to my pieces once they were fully dry and started my painting process. As I mentioned earlier, for my flower pot and the vase, I wanted to create a look where you have the spotted clay on the top and a darker rim on the bottom. And to create that bottom section, I wanted to paint it with coffee paint. I used 2 teaspoons of instant coffee powder and added a bit of water. I tried the coffee paint on a piece of paper first to see if I liked the shade of it, and then decided to go for a slightly brighter, more watered out version. To create a perfect straight line, I laid my graphite pen onto this little bottle lid because it had just the right height, and then rotated the piece along it. Then I repeated the same thing with a thin piece of wood underneath to get a little higher line on the plant pot. And you have a perfect line around it. Then I used this graphite line as my guide and painted the bottom part of the pot and the vase. The next look I was going for was this dark base tone and some carve outs like on this picture. So I darkened the paint by adding more coffee powder and painted the plain white little trays. I gave them 2 coats of the coffee paint, which left me with this nice rich brown tone. For the carving, I used this triangular clay carving tool and this needle tool. If you don't have that, you could probably do that also very well with a nail or a thicker needle. I used the needle tool to very slightly carve in the pattern I wanted and then started scratching along the line. It is hard to get it super even because the clay is hard already, but especially the scratching with the needle worked quite well. And I wanted to achieve an organic, slightly rough look anyways, so I was happy with how it worked out. For the spotted, slightly larger bowl, I wanted to create a dark brown rim around the top to give it this organic ceramic bowl vibe. Marci is using this technique where she adds body soap to the coffee paint mix to create bubbles. So that's what I went for here, because I figured that this was the best way to get a lot of texture without the paint running down the bowl. I added a few drops of shower body soap to my leftover coffee paint and bubbled it up with my straw. If you do so, you create those really large bubbles, but by stirring it around, you pop those and create a nice foam with small bubbles. I picked up that foam with my straw and literally just laid the bubbles onto the rim of the bowl. Then let it dry and repeated it again. So this time I didn't put any varnish on my pieces. So one of the reasons is that I just really like the matte finished look that they have already and I didn't want to change that. The other reason is that I think if you varnish them, you should use a spray on varnish to not smudge around the coffee paint you applied, and I just didn't have that. And also my pieces will not get in contact with any moisture or water, so they don't really need this extra protection layer anyways. So these are my final pieces. So painting with coffee was so much fun. Thank you again, Marci, for this really cool idea. I just love how they turned out. If you guys want to see more ideas for air dry clay projects, also check out my other videos on that topic. I will link them for you. And if you want to give coffee painting a go and also see what Marci created in her project, make sure to head over to her channel as well. So let me know in the comments, guys, which piece you think turned out best. Also feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!